Good day, class. This is Eng 2010, Engineering Economics, and this lecture is about time value of money. The topics that we're going to discuss is about the following. We'll do a little bit of recap. We will discuss a previous lecture, and then we're going to be talking about time value of money, specifically what is interest, what are the rate of interest, simple compound interest, nominal and effective rate of interest, the equations of value, inflation, discount, and of course, the sample problems in between. So, just a recap again, we're talking about engineering economy, which is primarily a collection of techniques that simplifies comparisons and of alternatives on an economic basis. It helps us make informed decisions, and it involves analysis and an evaluation of the factors that will affect the economic success of engineering projects, whether we should proceed with it or not. And then hopefully at the end you make some recommendation that will ensure the best use of its capital, meaning it's kung sulit ba yung pondo na ibibigay sa inyo. Okay? We're not coming up with valuations here or anything. Normally, as engineers, we're handed up a project, and it's really up to us and several other groups or players in a project to fully maximize its full use and creation of value. So one of the foundations of engineering economy, you will be looking into words such as this. Uh, Alternatives are basically options or standalone solutions for a given situations. Cash flows, that is the inflow and outflow of money. And then, of course, an alternative selection that leads to actions. One usually is to not do anything uh, or do the alternative. The other one is evaluation criteria, or basically the metric. What is being measured here to find what is best. And then finally, the time value of money. We will deal with the cash flows and time value of money for the succeeding lecture here. But for alternatives and alternative selections and the appointment of proper evaluation criteria, more on that on the latter part of our lecture here. But for now, we'll be discussing what time value of money means. Essentially, it is the amount of money over a given time period, and it's the most important cost of engineering economy. Okay. The other terms, again, like I said on the previous lecture, the other terms for the engineering economy are engineering economic analysis, a capital allocation study, and economic analysis, and of similar descriptors. Then, of course, we will be using the concept of cash flow diagrams that we discussed last lecture. Essentially, it's a visual representation of where cash go in and go out. And we can see it from the perspective of a person or company, depending if you're the lender or the lendee. You know, you're the lender or versus the borrower, or you're the one investing, or are you the one taking the money from, so on and so forth. So we represent it by an upward arrow, meaning positive cash flow, which is inflow, and then downward arrow would represent disbursement, or negative cash flow, or cash outflow. Just like how we deal with problems, sometimes it's best to visualize things. And there's a saying that goes, what you can't visualize, you can't achieve. That same goes with your dreams, your goals, and even as basic as problem solvings. Okay? The next part is, since we're talking about time value of money, I wanted to ask the question, hanggang saan naabot yung 20 pesos mo? I hope you guys are old enough and young enough to know this commercial about 10 years ago. If you recall the Cornetto Cornetto commercials back then, judging from your age, you are probably 12 years old, or 11 or 10 years old. Some of you are 10. You should probably have seen this, Saan naabot ang 20 pesos mo? Okay? So, I use this example because I want to ask several things, specifically 3 things, actually. Do you have an idea how much the jeepney fare back then 10 years ago versus now? And if so, how many trips you can do with that 20 pesos? Do you also happen to know the price of rice back then, rice grains back then for a kilo, and how many 20 pesos you can buy from them? Then, of course, finally, you know how much is the Cornetto ice cream right now? The Selecta Cornetto ice cream. By the way, this is not sponsored by Cornetto Select. Okay. So to give the idea, and based on the source from Philippine Statistics Authority and Land Transportation, LTFRB, at least for the jeepney part, the price back then, 10 years ago, so that's 2014, that will be 7.5 pesos for the first kilometer, Steve. Meaning for at least, and then I think it's another succeeding 7.5 pesos for another kilometer or so. So in short, 20 pesos can go a long way. Okay, so it could definitely go round trip. If we're gonna consume only for 4 kilometers, that's about 20 divided by 7.5. That's about two trips. Okay, about 2.6. So probably two trips and a half. But right now, if we're gonna compare this price, it's gonna be 13 to 15 pesos depending where you are, according to LTFRB, at least for the first 4 kilometers, and that's the average. So over the past 10 years, that's about a 66.7% difference, or that's the difference between the fare right now versus back then. As for our rice creams or mga bigas natin, it was actually 43 kilos back then based on retail price, average retail price back then. It was a lot cheaper on the actual grain from the farmers. That's about 41. So there's a 2 pesos difference. There's a 2 pesos difference for the retail and the farmers, the wholesale price. And then for the present day, unfortunately, guys, di pa rin 20 pesos. So still 51.13 pesos on average, according sa Philippine Statistics Authority under their statistical analysis on rice grains and agriculture. So that's the average. So the difference is about 17.27%. As you can see here, why the staggering difference between the jeepney fare and pamasahe sa jeepney and the rice? Because for one, there's several factors actually, economical, and then there's the government side or the legal side of things. Uh, Unfortunately for the jeepney, we are heavily affected by price changes because we don't we are not exactly a oil producing country, and most of our just run on oil, specifically diesel, gasoline, so on and so forth. As for rice, since inherently we kind of produce it here, but we also import every now and then, but it's also heavily incentivized, or what do you call it? Yeah, incentivized by the government. So you could say that there's a certain level of control there, but still, there's still a price difference because of inflation as well and other economic factors. As for Cornetto, luckily, I think Selecta gave it 20 pesos, and quite recently, I think way back in 2018, 2017, they made it back to 20 pesos. However, there's a significantly noticed volume change, basically. The Cornetto back then was still a bit larger, and there's a lot of variety of flavors, but now it's a lot smaller, and sometimes there are product defects, like no cones, but still significantly smaller. So that's the time value of money for you. So in short, even if it's 100 pesos or 20 pesos, the prices for basic commodities like, for example, meats, veggies, and other items that we actually need for our daily life that may not be, organic, will not be the prices of them will not be the same now as it was before. Okay, so the 1,000 pesos now and 1,000 pesos back then will not be the same, and that's because instinctively the money we have now loses its value due to its inflation, basically. Okay, so here's another concept. So 1,000 pesos here, of course, is not equal back then. Okay, so as it moves forward, this one's moving forward, by the way. Okay, there we go. So there's growth in interest, but however, if the growth in interest, if the inflation is a lot bigger, or the inflation rate is a lot bigger than the growth of interest rate, then your money still loses value. Okay, the buying power of money at different points in time is not equal, even though it has the same number of value. That's fiat money. That's fiat money for you guys. Okay. So another, let's show two different examples. How we represent those formulas. So for number one, we have here a loan of 10,000 pesos at simple interest, and so just double checking. Okay, so at 10%, it will become 15,000 pesos after 5 years. If we're gonna represent it with our cash flow diagram, it's gonna be looking something like this: 10,000 and then 15,000. So it's here. This is coming from the perspective of the lender. I want to show 10,000, and then after 5 years, it'll be 15,000. Okay, so 15,000 paid after 5 years. That will be 10,000 loan in terms of the value when you factor in the interest on the money. So the key there is trying to bring back this 15,000 back to its present. So if we're gonna convert 15,000 back to 10,000 pesos, just to know what is the interest accrued here, or the 10% neto basically, or we have to multiply it with something, the adjustment factor, and as you know, that will be the interest rate. Okay, we're just still representing this as as it is lang muna. Okay, so to get you 10,000 pesos na yun, you multiply 15,000 with an adjusted factor with time value. Okay, so that means not only the interest rate, but how many years you go back, or how many interest periods. Okay, the same way with this is the sample one. So it's gonna be represented by this particular algorithm here. It will make sense later. We will not be defining, formulas. We're still gonna define them, but by words. Okay, we're not still using algebraic formulas here. The same way too for sample two. Okay. So what is that adjustment factor basically? The adjustment factor we're talking here is the interest rate, or specifically the interest. Basically, interest here. This is not the rate. This is the amount accrued over a particular time. Okay, it is the manifestation of the time value of money, and usually it's the difference between your principal amount and the ending amount of money, or the amount of money you owed if you are borrowing. Okay, so that's outstanding. If the difference is zero or negative, there is no interest. Okay, the interest period, like I mentioned in the previous slides, it is basically the time unit of the rate. And the interest here, so here's the formula. Interest is the amount owed now, whereas minus principal. The interest rate is simply the interest accrued over per unit time divided by principal as 100%. I have a question for you guys. Hopefully you could answer me this during our next meeting. So if we could recall, depending on which side you are, what is the difference between interest paid versus interest earned? Here's a diagram from Leland and Blank, just to give you an idea what it is. So from the borrower or investor's perspective. Okay, I won't answer it now. Here's another example. So let's say that we are an employee at laserkinetics.com. You borrows $10,000 on May 1 and must repay a total of $10,700 exactly 1 year later. Determine the interest amount and the interest rate paid. Oh, luckily for us, we know the formula. Okay, so what do we have here so far? We have here the 10,000 pesos. Okay, we know that 10,700 is the amount owed exactly after 1 year. So we know the period, which is 1 year. So we are required to find the interest accrued, or the total amount that we owe. And then what is the interest rate? So the interest paid here is just simply 10,700 minus $10,000. So that will be $700 here. And the interest rate here is simply the $700 divided by 10,000, which is roughly 6.54%. 700 divided by 10,000. Actually, sorry. Scratch that. I don't know why I did that. It's just 7%. My bad. Okay. This is not functioning. I don't know why. This is 7%. Okay. Okay, pen. So this is wrong. I don't know where this comes from, but this is wrong. Okay. Next. For Stereophonics Incorporated, plans to borrow $20,000 from a bank 1 year at 9% interest for new recording equipment. Compute the interest and the total amount due after 1 year. So we are given here with a principal of 20,000 with a time period of 1 year with an interest rate of 9%. We're here to compute the interest or the amount accrued over time, and then of course the total amount. So that will be the interest accrued plus the original interest plus the original principal. So that will be here interest accrued and the total amount owed. So using the interest, we know the interest rate, so that's the interest accrued over principal. So just simply 9% times the principal, that will be 1,800. And then the total amount is simply just the principal plus the interest, so that will be $21,800. So graphically, it would look something like this one. So visually, that's how it looks like. Yeah. There's another way actually to compute for B, the total amount owned. For interest, you simply, the total due here, or basically, you're talking about its future, what's the future amount dito. So you can simply, total due is simply principal times the summation of 1 plus the interest rate. So the formula that we are all accustomed now is getting much more familiar, but more on that later. Okay. So going back to interest, here's the formula. So the difference between interest paid versus interest earned, if you could recall the formula for interest rate, you could see the formula here: interest accrued per unit time per principal divided by principal times 100%. And when you mention the word rate of return, it's also interest accrued per unit time divided by principal times 100%. And ROR here is simply ROR and ROI usually are interchangeably in various industries and settings, and particularly where significant capital funds are allocated to engineering-oriented programs. Okay? So the difference here is simply that for interest rate, it's more being used on borrowing and lending, while um, interest earned is rather used for investors' perspective. Okay? That's just simply the difference. Okay. Now for our terminologies, we will be using these particular symbols. So usually we go P, F, normally that's PW for present worth. Depende, pare-parehas lang naman yan. So we generally represented by P and F. P representing present worth, present value, net present value, discounted cash flow, capitalized costs. DCF and CC are more financial terms. If you're more, private equity, CFA, so on and so forth. So for F naman, this is the value or amount of money at some future time. Sometimes it's being called future worth or future value. A is sometimes this is any series of consecutive equal end of period amounts of money is called annual worth. Sometimes amortization when you're dealing with your own debt. Okay, and then for N, that is our symbol for number of interest periods. That could be years, months, and days. Okay. Then of course we have I, which is interest rate per unit time per time period. That depends. That's percent per year, sometimes percent per month. And we have time here in general. Time is stated in periods of years, months, and days. You could say, what's the difference between N and T? But because sometimes in a given problem, you're gonna compound it on a specific basis. Okay. See more on let's it's this is the type of subjects where you get to understand it by solving more of the problems here. So let's go deeper. So there's two kinds of interest, as you already know. There's the simple interest. There's the compound interest. For interest, basically, for simple interest, we're only using the principal only and ignoring the interest that had been accumulated over a preceding period. So we don't add up the interest accrued from the previous year or from the previous period. Hence why the term simple. There's two kinds of simple interest. We have the ordinary simple interest and the exact simple interest. The difference between them is how we define the number of days per month. So yung division of the days natin. So for simple interest, ordinary simple interest, we count 30 days per month. There's got to be 12 months a year and then 360 days basis in a 1 year. For which refer, your banker year. For exact simple interest, from the word itself, exact, we are counting 365-day basis for non-leap year, 366 days for leap year. Okay? So we basically computed on the exact number of days in a year. So this is the sample here. The formula we'll be using for simple interest is the same for ordinary and exact simple interest will be this one. I will be the interest accrued equals to the principal times the number of periods it's accumulated and times interest rate. And for the future value or the accumulated value, total accumulated value dito, the future value, that will simply be principal plus interest, like we represented in words a few slides ago, or just simply the product of principal times 1 plus NI. Okay, there we go. Let's try to solve some problems. Hopefully you can solve some of this yourself. So our sample number 4, what will be the future worth of money after 14 months if a sum of 10,000 pesos is invested today at an ordinary simple interest rate of 12%? And remember to draw the cash flow diagram. So what do we have here? We have 10,000 pesos as our principal. We know our interest rate, small I, that's 12%. So we're here to find what's the future worth of the money after 14 months. So I just forgot to add just the 14 months here. So from the perspective of owner, the cash flow diagram would look something like this. So, yeah. So invested, so meaning he gave away the money first and with expected return. So there we go. So what is the amount there after 14 months? So we can use the solution here. Just simply F is equals to P plus the interest or P times 1 plus N and I. So it's simply like this. All they have to do is just substitute the formula. There we go. Since this is a simple interest rate, so we're basing it on a per banker year basis. In this case, we're using the after 1 year, which is 12 months. So hence yung proper period niya will be N divided by yung total periods na dito. Okay? So yung 14 months in yung number of periods it will be multiplied from, but we have the basis on a year per year basis. So that will be 14 months over 12 months. Okay, and then times 12. Times by 12. So the answer here is 11,400 pesos. Next, let's try naman here. What is the annual rate of interest if 265 pesos is earned in 4 months on an investment of 15,000 pesos? Draw the cash flow diagram. So here we have, again, the principal of 15,000. Here, this time around, we have the interest accrued after 4 months, which is 265. And we are finding hindi ko lang napalitan yung F, sorry. We're finding the annual rate of interest. So In we're finding the interest rate basically here. So here 15,000. Uh, so basically here, we can easily get the future work here. We simply add together the principal plus we simply add here the principal plus the interest accrued. Wait, well, so nito. This is sample number 5, right? Let me just edit this lang and then there we go. Yeah, so and then the future value here is simply 15,265. Now, knowing yung future value and yung present value, we can still now determine the interest rate, which is simply I equals to P and I without even determining the future value here actually. So that's 265 equals to 15,000 times 4 over 12, okay, times I, which is the unknown, and I here is just simply 5.3%. Okay. Okay, for number 6, here we have an example of exact simple interest. So we have here determine the exact simple interest on 500 pesos for the period between January 10 hanggang October 28, 1996 at 16% interest dito. So we know very well that this one, principal natin dito is 500 pesos. And then we have an interest rate of 16%. We have to find what is the what is the amount accrued over this time period, no, or the interest natin dito. Okay, so from here we can imagine our cash flow diagram looking something like this. An exact date, January 10, 1996, probably, or you're not yet born at mga panahon na to. Actually, no, di pa kayo pinapanganak nun, most likely. So, yeah, 28. Kasi at least most of you is what, 22, 23? Yeah, you're still 4 years early pa ang origin story nyo. And then here we have a 500 pesos dito and then yung 500 plus yung interest na to. Okay? So it's gotta look like something like this. But how are we gonna proceed with this? We first off, we try to determine, so ang simple exact interest natin, we know you may 30 days. January has a 31 calendar. So yeah, you can check kung paano yung techniques nito before. Unlike I am checking it now. So may 31s, you can use your knuckle technique, 31, January, February, as 28 or 29. So ang tanong na lang dito is, does 1996 fall on a leap year ba? Yun yung magandang question. So we know by dividing it by 4, 400 in a century. So we can definitely say that it's divided by 4, so it definitely has a leap year. So yung February gagamitin natin dito has 29 days, followed by 31 in March, and then April has 30, May has 31, June has 30, July has 31, and August has 31, definitely. Yun lang naman pinagkaiba nun. And then August, June, July, August, September as 30 days. And then finally, we reach October in 28 days. Something like this one. So we total those days. Now we have 292 days. And what we do here, yung 16% na to, yeah. So we will definitely be using this formula. The interest is equal to the product of P times N times I, which is 16%. And the number of periods here is simply, again, just like any simple interest, we're going to convert it on a per year basis. Since exact though, that will be 292 days divided by 366. And it's a leap year. Yeah, 366. If hindi siya leap year, we will just be counting it as 365. So 292 divided by 365, pero leap year siya. So using that formula, we will reach the amount of 63.83 pesos The amount accrued, 16% from the principal of 500 pesos. So if you want to ask, if I ask the question, okay, what's the future? What's the total value here? That will be the total value after 292 days is 563.83 pesos. Okay, next up is about compound interest. So from simple interest, now we're going to be moving to compound interest. When it comes to compound interest, the interest calculated of the principal plus the total amount interest accumulated is accrued uh, in the previous periods. So hence why compound interest means interest on top of interest. Here's the age-old formula where the future value of that compounded, the future value is equals to P times 1 plus I raised to N, where the 1 plus I raised to N here is commonly called the single payment compound factor. It is designated with the symbol F of P in terms of percentage, in terms of this interest rate compounded in N periods, basically. Now, if we could reverse it, we can also find the present worth using this particular formula. Oops, sorry. We can also determine the present worth using this particular formula uh, by simply P is equals to F plus 1 plus I raised to negative N, where 1 plus I raised to negative is called the single payment present worth designated by with this particular symbol. Now, if you could put this in the table, from a borrower's perspective, this is the principal at beginning period. The interest earned, accrued or earned, wrong spelling, during period, amount at the end of the period. So what happens here is whatever the interest earned is being added to the following year, that will be your new principal, so on and so forth. As a classic example, here's the table. This is the simple interest. It's just 5 pesos, 9 difference none. That's it. Whatever the interest earned here is just the same. Whereas in a compounded, whatever the compounded interest here is added to your as your new principal. So 105, then 5% here, that'll 5.25. Hence, those who masters the principles of compounded interest can be really wealthy, in the future. Okay. Next up is the rate of interest. Here we have normal rate of interest and the effective rate of interest. So just discuss for you nominal rate of interest. So the nominal rate of interest specifies the interest rate and its several interest periods in 1 year. The as stated without adjustment to the full effect of compounding. For example, we have statements like 12% compoundly on a monthly basis. So what does it mean? So we have this formula here, I equals to R over M. So the I here is basically the rate of interest per interest period. R here is the nominal interest rate. Normally that's this one. And the number of compounding periods per year, that'll be M. Okay? Okay. And this is the compound interest in its proper form. F is equals to P plus 1 plus R over M, and N, that will be the number of periods, times M, number of years usually. Okay. So when I said compounded semi-annually, that will be 2. So that will be 2 times number of periods, usually in years. Okay. Semi-annually, that will be semi-quarterly, that'll be 8. Quarterly, that'll be 4. Bi-monthly, that'll be 6. Daily, that'll be 360, or sometimes 365 or 366, depending on the description. Annually, that'll be 1. Okay? And here is usually presented in years. Okay? P here is the present or the principal value. F here is the future value or the accumulated value. Okay. And then we have the effective rate of interest in this particular format, where this is the actual or the exact rate of interest on the principal for 1 year. Normally, you hear about the effective rate of interest sa banks. They're referring to the interest rate on a per annum basis. Usually, naka per annum basis sila. But if you're taking loans, less than 12 months, normally you would hear your nominal effective rate of interest, or you can convert naman yung effective rate of interest to yung nominal rate. There's actually a relation in between. Okay? So in this particular case, this is the effective rate of interest, which we equal to 1 plus r over n raised to m minus 1, where m here is the number of compounding periods in a given year. So na per year basis siya. Hence n, usually the previous slide is in terms of, on a per year basis. Okay, and r here is your nominal interest rate. So may relationship sila actually. So there you go. R here is your nominal interest rate. I here is the rate of interest per interest period. Okay, so yun lang naman yung difference down nila. And then let's have some sample problems dito. For example, this one, how much will be the accumulated amount of 10,000 pesos after 3 years if it's loaned at a rate of 10% compounded semi-annually? Okay, so here we provide a cash flow diagram as well. So let's dig it in one by one. Okay, tama naman. So how much will be the so yung future value nito? So the future value, a compounded 10% semi-annually. So we have your principal here, which is 10,000 pesos. We have you nominal interest rate, which is 10% semi-annually. So that will give us M, yung compounding period, which is 2. And this is our period, 3 years. So using this is our cash flow diagram natin. So we here years 1, 2, and 3, and it's compounded semi-annually. So how many times? Twice. It's being compounded twice. So our formula here is simply this. F is equals to 10,000 plus 1 plus R over M, and n times raised to n times M. So 10,000 here should look something like this. 1 plus 0.1 over 2. That's 10% over 2, which is yung number of times being compounded. And then raised to 3 times 2. So yung 3 natin here in 3 years times 2 yung number of times is being compounded, which would give us 13,400.96. Okay? Just to complete yung cash flow diagram natin, is actually you can do it manually dito. Okay, so for 3 years it's being compounded semi-annually. So it's being compounded twice, meaning sa half month niya, whichever this is, he or she is receiving something dito. Okay, and this one may receive rin siya dito. This one may receive rin siya dito. This one may receive siya dito. 1, 2, yeah, tama. So by the time yung accumulated value nito is magiging 13,400.96. Okay? Sometimes papatanong ko kayo, okay, ano yung tsura nun? If you know yung total value nito compounded semi-annually, 10% for 3 years is 13,400.96. Ano yung value niya in between year 1 and year 2? So, baka pwede akong bigyan ng problems na ganun. About this one, find the nominal rate. So we're here finding the nominal rate. So we're finding R, which if converted quarterly could be used instead of 10%. If converted quarterly could be used instead of 12% compounded monthly. What is the corresponding effective rate nito? Okay, so there's actually 2 questions dito. We're here to find a nominal rate. If converted quarterly, magiging 12% compound monthly siya. And then, what is the effective rate dito? So, it's kinda looking like this one, 12% compounded monthly, and whatever the percent there compounded quarterly. It must have the same interest rate. Dapat lang, kasi regardless kung compounded monthly siya or quarterly, okay, I don't know what's happening. Regardless of compounded siya monthly or quarterly, it should have the same per annum interest rate, or yung effective interest rate natin dito. So we can make sense of the formula by equating yung effective interest rate at compounded quarterly, and then an effective interest rate at compounded monthly, something like this one. Okay, so parehas dapat sila. And if we're gonna use muna yung formula for 12, because we will have an interest rate of 12.68%. Eh, pag ginamit naman natin yung quarterly, we will have about, we can get the nominal rate doon at 12.12%. There we go. So, nakita natin doon, nakuha natin yung nominal rate niya. So, 12.12% yung nominal rate niya, which if converted quarterly, could be used instead of the 12% compounded monthly. Hence, this one, 12.12% computed quarterly will be equal to yung 12% compounded monthly natin. So, if we compute it, it should still have the same effective rate of interest dito. Okay? So, hindi ko na ginawa yung cash flow diagram, pinopia ko lang eh. Hindi pala applicable dito. Next is the equations of value naman dito. Essentially, sa equations of value, para lang itong mass balance natin dito. Or sa equations natin, kailangan sa statics natin o sa mechanics, kailangan balance lang yung forces. Kailangan yung equilibrium lang sila. Dapat kung ano yung nilabas mong pera, whatever yung money acquired, yun rin yung dapat nilabas. Kailangan equal lang naman siya. Kailangan nila mag-equalize ng. Okay? I'll show you an example dito. Basically, yung equations of value is obtained by setting the sum of the value on a certain comparison or focal date of one set of obligations equal to the sum of values on the same date of another set of obligations. Okay? Like for example, pag bumili ka ng lupa daw, worth 1 million pesos. A man bought amount of 1 million pesos. A man bought a lot worth 1 million pesos if paid in cash. On the installment basis, he paid a down payment of 200,000 pesos kaagad. And then 300,000 at the end of 1 year. And then 400,000 pesos at the end of 3 years. And yung final payment at the end of 5 years. Yun yung ano. What was the final payment if the interest rate was 20%? Dahil hindi naman sinabi kung compound or something, pero wala naman sinabing period or anything. So we can assume na parang simple interest to. Okay? So we can lay it out just like so. So ito yung perspective naman. Here's yung cash flow diagram natin. So bumili siya ng worth 1 million pesos if paid ng cash. But at the same time, nag-down siya on the same period na yun. So ano yung magiging net natin dito on period 0? Which means 800,000 yung magiging value niya dyan. And then yung succeeding payments will be 300,000 after 1 year, 400,000 pesos after 3 years, and then let Q be our final payment dito. Now, yung next natin dito is, we will try to bring yung amount na to. So, yung 800,000 dito is yung present amount natin dito. And then yung 300 and 400, basically, ito yung mga babayaran niya. What we need to do dito is, kailangan ibalik natin sila on the same time period para parehas sila ng timeline, basically. So here, especially we're finding yung present worth ng 300,000 after 1 year, yung 400,000, yung present worth niya after 3 years in this case, and yung Q after 5 years. So it's something like this one. Okay, para pare-present timeline. Then, dapat, ang mangyayari ito, whatever amount na makuha natin dito, pag sinam mo siya, dapat equal to 800,000 yan. Then, kung isasama natin again yung 200,000 dito, dapat 1 million to. Kasi di mo pa din-net siya. Dito, sinimplify na natin. 800,000 na kasi 1 million minus yung 200,000 yan, 800. Yun yung value na na-acquire niyang lupa. Okay? Okay, next. So, ang mangyayari na, simple lang naman. It's straight up algebra formula naman dito. All we have to do is just, yung 800,000 should be equal to the present worth formula ng 300, 400K, and whatever yung Q na to. Okay? So, in this case, we can represent the formula just like so. Hindi yan yung pinaka-intuitive, pero we can expand it just like this. So, medyo shinortcut na yan. So, ito yung present worth formula naman. So, basically, that will be yung future worth, 300K, times 1 plus whatever yung interest rate na yan. So, in this case, it seems to be that we're operating at a simple interest rate lang naman. Okay, so that's 1.2 raised to negative 1, negative 3, and then, nagkamali lang ako siguro dito. That's supposed to be negative 5. Let me just edit lang that for you guys. Where is that? Okay, okay, and then there we go. There we go. Okay, so yeah, there we go, -5, and we will arrive with an answer of Q is 792,560. Now, if you add the values nito, actually magiging 799,990 point something yan. Pero still, if you round it off, magiging 800,000 pesos yan. Okay? So just to check kung tama yung nakuha yung Q dito, the sum of all the values on the right side of the equation you should equal to 800,000. Okay? There we go. And don't forget to box your answers, okay? Now, pagdating sa compounding naman, we have several scenarios dito. We have yung discrete compounding and yung continuously compounding. Normally, we deal with yung continuous compounding dito. Discrete compounding, the interest is compounded at the end of each finite length period, whether month by month, quarter, or year. Now, pag continuous compounding man, it is assumed that the cash payments occur once per year, but the compounding is continuous throughout the year. So hence, we have this particular formula where F is equals to P E raised to Rn. So naka-E siya. Okay? Parang log natin function na yun. And then yung pwede natin baliktarin, we can get also yung present value dito or in principal, which is F is equals to E raised to negative Rn. R here is the nominal interest rate, and here is the number of years. Let's try some sample problems. So compare the accumulated amounts after 5 years of 1,000 pesos invested at the rate of 10% per year, compounded A, annually, B, semi-annually, C, quarterly, D, monthly, or E, daily, and F, continuously. So this is a good exercise, especially it's a good recap kung paano natin gamitin yung mga compounding formulas natin dito. Okay? So you can try this for yourself muna for a few moments. I'll give you time. You can pause the video. So applying a solution N would look something like this. There we go. It's just simply that using the formula F is equals to P 1 plus I equals N. There we go. And then, magkakaiba na siya pagdating sa F kasi raised to E din kasi it's continuously. Okay? Which is slight change lang dito. So for example, A, that's gonna be annually lang naman. So F here will be yung future accumulated amount mo dito and P here is your principal which is 1,000 pesos. So yung period natin dito is 5 years and yung N times N to usually okay is N times N M. Yeah, nakalimutan ko ilagay M dito. Okay? Which is yung number of compounded periods natin. Pero in this case, we can definitely use the formula kasi una, annually naman siya. So N, so that's 5 years times 1, that's raised to, wala, so that's 5 pa rin. And then yung interest rate natin dito, yung nominal interest rate natin is R equals to 1 since annually siya divided by 1 year basically. Divided by number of, sorry. R natin interest rate natin is 10% pa rin and divided by number of compounding periods, so that's 1 pa rin. So that will be 0.10 pa rin. Okay? So, in the short, ang sagot natin is magiging 1,610.51. Then dito naman, ang magiging formula natin here is, ba't naging 10 naman to and then may divided by 2? Bakit? Kasi semi-annually to. If maalala natin yung compounding compounded interest formula natin, yung accumulated value niya, so magiging principal times 1 plus R over yung M raised to N times N. In this case, yung R natin dito will be 10%, yun yung nominal rate of interest natin, divided by number of compounding periods. Semi-annually, that will be number 2. So 0.10 over 2. And then raised to the product of the number of periods times the number of times being compounded in that particular year. So in this case, N natin is 5 years times compounded semi-annually times 2. That would be 5 times 2. Okay, and then so on and so forth. And then, yun nga, nag-iba lang dito continuously. So pag continuously, mag-iba yung formula natin. Okay, gagawin natin si E, si Eula, Ola. Ay, tama ba? Euler ba yun? Kalimutan ko. Basta yan. And then, point 10 R times N. So that's point 10 or 10% times yung 5 dito. That will be 1648.72. Okay. Next up naman is yung concept ng discount. Okay? So yung formula ng discount natin is simply 1 minus 1 plus I raised to negative 1. So, or yung interest rate dito, yung rate of discount naman natin dito of the same period will be the rate of discount divided by 1 minus rate of discount for that particular involved period. So, what is discount? Discount is on a negotiable paper is the difference between the present worth and the worth of paper at some time in the future. Okay? Basically, discount is interest paid in advance lang naman. Okay? So, yung cash flow niya would look something like this one. So, ito, we are representing it parang on a peso value scale. So, here's an example. A man borrowed 5,000 pesos sa banko and agreed to pay the loan at the end of 9 months. The bank discounted the loan and gave him 4,000 in cash kagad. So, here's yung sample ng cash flow niya. Okay? What was the rate of discount dito? Okay? So, what was the rate of discount? What was the rate of interest? And then what was the rate of the interest for 1 year? Teka lang. So, hindi ko lang ba taging load yan. So, that's supposed to be low. Okay. Alright. So for discount, yung formula naman niya is simply discount over principal, which is 1,000 over 5,000 pesos yun, which is 20%. Another solution is, of course, convert it to peso. On a peso value scale, so how much yun? So 20%, diba? So 1 minus 0.8, edi magiging 20% yun. Okay? Pero prefer pa rin yung discount over principal lang naman. Madali lang naman yun. And then yung interest rate niya, so it's just simply yung following yung formula. That will be D divided by 1 minus D. So 0.2 divided by the difference between 1 and 0.2, which is 25%. Okay? Or we can simply just, divide yung interest earned over present worth, which is 1,000 over 1,000. That will be 25% pa rin. And then finally, yung see what was the rate of interest for 1 year. So in this particular case, that will be I equals to, dapat yan. So that will be interest or accrued over 1 year divided by principal times period. So that's 9 months, diba? So that's gonna be 9 over 12 lang naman dito. So 1,000 divided by the product ng 4,000 and 9 over 12 is equals to 33.33%. Again, makikita nyo guys dito, iba yung rate of it. What was the rate of interest throughout the period na yun, and then what was the rate of interest for 1 year. So yung rate of interest na yun, over the period of 9 months yan, that's the difference. And then there's a difference within the whole entire year lang naman yun. So you have to convert yung 9 months na yun over your per year basis. Okay? Kasi naka 9 months yun eh. Alright, next is we have inflation naman. Inflation here is the increase of prices of goods and services from 1 year to another. Decreasing money's buying power. So ito yung kalaban natin. So kung yung compounding interest is actually kung kaibigan natin yun, inflation yung kalaban niya. Okay? So normally ito yung formula niya. Okay, so again, this is inflation. So ito yung normally ginagamit natin formula. F is equals to P over 1 plus F raised to N. And if the interest is continuously being compounded at the same time inflation is occurring, the formula we can use is this one. P, the accumulated value, or F, is equals to the principal times 1 plus I divided by 1 plus F. 1 plus I is yung inflation. And then 1 plus F usually in inflation pala. 1 plus I is yung interest rate natin, compounded. And then yung N natin is yung period dito, okay? Number of years. So dito naman, itong formula to, hindi ko na properly label, but this is yung future cost and then present cost. this is used when we're determining prices, okay? So I have examples dito para malaman natin. Again, yung inflation natin dito is the increase in prices of goods and services from one year to another. Decreasing yung money's buying power natin. So we have these three samples here. So let's use them. For example, here we have an economy experiencing inflation at an annual rate of 8%. So that is your inflation rate. If this continues, what will 1,000 pesos be worth 2 years from now in terms of today's peso? So from here, we know yung principal value natin is 1,000. And yung inflation rate natin dito is 8% at the period of 2 years. Required, ano yung natin? Ano yung future worth natin? Ano yung accumulated value or whatever yung worth ng 1,000 pesos after 2 years. So we can use yung formula to F is equals to P over 1 plus F raised to N. And that's simply 1,000 pesos divided by 1 plus 0.08 raised to 2. And we have the answer of 857.34. So yes, if you're, for example, if you're gonna, just keep yung money mo just sa piggy bank mo, it will definitely reduce yung value kasi yung piggy bank mo, which is a physical bank mo, is not really a good vehicle for you to increase yung value ng money mo kasi kakalabanin ka ng inflation. And inflation is usually a factor of ng economics ng one country and depending on yung outlook from another economic bloc. Next up is a man invested 10,000 pesos at an interest rate of at the rate of 10% compounded annually. What will be the final amount of investment in terms of today's peso after 5 years if the inflation remains at the same rate of 8% per year? Okay. So, pwede natin himayin muna ng konti. Okay? So, we have a principal dito which is 10,000 pesos. Meron tayong interest rate dito at 10% compounded annually. So, okay naman siya per year. Pero, may inflation tayo at 8% per year. At tinatanong sa atin dito, ano yung final amount of the investment after 5 years? So, tingnan natin. So, ito yung given natin. We're required to find yung future amount nito despite the inflation dito. So, if it's gonna be continuously compounded, we can definitely use this formula. F is equals to, kasi ginagamit natin to pag may kasabay siyang, pag kina-compound pa rin siya, but may kalabang inflation, okay? So, yan yung formula na gagamitin natin. Substitute yung values natin. So, makita nyo to, ito yung 10% compounded annually. Nagkataon lang ng yan the annually. So, that means 0.1 divided by 1. And then N times M, which is that's 5 years times 1. Kasi annually lang naman siya compound. Pero, syempre, pag compounded semi-annually, quarterly, iba rin yung kwento doon. Okay? Diba? Tapos divided by 0.08, that is yung inflation rate, the inflation rate natin. So, magiging future value natin is around 10,160.86, meaning, tumubo pa rin yung pera niya ng total of 960.86 pesos despite yung inflation na yun. Okay? Now, ito naman yung sa isang formula na pinakita ko doon, not properly labeled. So, what if pinapatanong sa'yo, an item costs 1,000 pesos presently? Now, if the inflation is at the rate of 8% per year, what will be the cost of the item in 2 years? So, ito siya. And then, ang kailangan naman natin itong formula na to. So, we substitute yung formula kasi kailangan natin yung future costs. We have yung inflation rate. We have everything na dito actually. So, we substitute. So, 1,000 times the 1 plus 0.08 and then i-square natin yung sum nan will give you 1,166.4 pesos. Okay? And that's it. So ito yung reference natin and you can practice more. I mainly got most of the problems sa mga librong to. Okay? Thank you so much. And there we go.